Hello, my name is Rodan and welcome to this nightmare fuel of a video. These stories are real, stories told by people collected from the Huffington Post and other websites. These are from people just like you. How about we get into it? Number 1. My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame sitting on a concrete block foundation. I have been living here for about 12 years now. All of the weird things that my siblings and me have heard through this house, this one is my favorite. This happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. He would practice in the early evenings and they would usually quit in 8 p.m. It was by that time I usually showed up and went to bed because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement, but the tricky part was they need to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen door, down the hall into the living room, and out the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now the basement is not clean, with full sight lines. There have been partitions made, and the boiler and the main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he is about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner, his eye sees it. It is a shadowy figure, right in his peripheral vision. His feeling of dread and uneasiness washes over my brother. He had been taught that if you were in the presence of a spirit or ghost, and you felt a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you, I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing the doors and turning off the lights as he was walking out. The last switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said that he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard but no rear garage. As he closed the gap behind himself and his friend laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He is already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked, "So, then who was it walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" Number 2. One night, when I was maybe 10 or 12, I had trouble falling asleep. My bedroom was the entire top floor of our house, with my bed and such being on the left side of the storage closets and a play area being on the right. I was lying in bed when I heard a noise from the other side of the room. I could see a rocking chair beginning to rock. It was sitting just outside one of the storage closet rooms. It proceeded to rock its way halfway across the room and stopped dead under the ceiling light. At this point, I was freaking the fuck out and just buried my head under the blankets, and I never peeked out again until morning. It was all confirmed to not be a dream, as the rocking chair was still in the middle of the room when I woke up. Furthermore, I got a stern reprimand from my parents for being up out of bed playing with my toys well past bedtime. Their bedroom was directly below the storage closet play area, and they had heard creaking of the rocking chair shuffling across the room. Number 3. My older sister has a ghost that's followed her around for years. I lived with her once for about 3 months, and so much weird stuff happened in that time. My sister would say to me when I mentioned it, it was that her ghost didn't like me being there. Things like going to bed with everything locked up and switched off, and waking up in the morning and the back door open, lights on, and kettle switched on. One night, my sister and I were getting ready to go out, and I had asked to borrow her liquid foundation. I used it and put it back where she kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she asked me for it, and it was nowhere to be seen. She accused me of taking it and made me buy her a new one, and refused to listen to my side of the story. About a year or so later, when she was packing up to move to a new house, she found the makeup in a shoebox with some old letters. The shoebox was zipped up in a suitcase that was underneath her bed. But probably the most scared I've ever felt was one afternoon when I was the only one in the house, which never happened as 4 other people lived there. I had arrived home from work and headed straight to the bathroom. All the doors, windows, etc. were closed. I was standing in the bathroom and started squeezing a pimple on my chin, and when a female voice in the hall said, "Stop picking your zits." It was loud enough and sounded real enough. At the time, I thought it was my sister, so I laughed and I told her to fuck off. As I asked what she was doing for dinner, no answer. I stuck my head out of the hall. No one was there. I searched the house top to bottom, and there was no one home. I sat on the front porch until someone else came home, because I didn't want to be alone in there. Number 4. This is a story I do not often tell. I promise sincerely that this has scarred me for life, and although I've looked into psychological explanations for what I've heard and natural explanations for what occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar, so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them when asking my mom. She figured they were just bumps in the night in typical kid nightmare material. I tried often to explain it to her that it was more than that, but they sounded different from any other way people's voices do. On some nights, I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. I should add at this point that when walking out in the hall to go to the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead you into the living room on the first floor, as my mom's bedroom was on the second floor. On one such night around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctively heard the phrase, "Look." And to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source. It was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid and only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know if I was being a good boy? I was so excited I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong, masculine voice, different from the first. Not at all like my father's, not to say he isn't masculine. It was just distinctively different. It said, "Stop, right now, go back up those stairs." I listened, turned around, and what happened next I am not sure I would believe if someone had told me this same story. After reaching the top stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we awoke the next morning, the Penn City lights, little Christmas lights, flower lights that glowed red, my mother had put on the railing down the stairs, were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a forceful tear. Laying in a single pile, the dry sink in the living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried that he had been victims of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be anything that happened. And then I saw it, and I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid that I could force no words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink, which had been facing up, there were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been torn, almost as if in a forceful grip. Something down there had grabbed it and threw it down. That what was the bang. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is sad because in some ways I would have liked to thank the man, masculine energy, that had stopped me from going down those stairs. This happened when I was 7. I am 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark, especially shadowy stairwell. Number 5. I used to live in a house that backs up to a big public open space where there are hiking trails, lots of joggers, and people walking their dogs. Anyway, one night I had a kinda creepy dream that an old lady came into my room and was trying to get me to come outside. The dream woke me up, so I got some water and turned off my fan because it was cold. Then I fell asleep again. I went right back into the same dream with this old lady coming in my room and calmly asking and saying, "You have to go outside now." I kept telling her no, it was too cold. I woke up again and my fan was on. I figured I must have just thought I turned it off, or the button got stuck, so I got up, turned the fan off, and went back to sleep. This time, I had the same exact dream, except she was much older, looking in this one, and was really agitated. She was yelling, "Go outside, you must go outside." I got up in a dream and followed her to the hallway. When I got to the hallway, she wasn't there, and then I woke up. I was actually standing in the fucking hallway. I had never ever walked around in my sleep before or after this. Also, my fan was on and I went back to my room. At this point, I was freaked out, so I got something to eat and watched TV for a couple hours. I went back to bed at around 5 or 6 and the dream did not come back. The fucked up part is that a couple days later, I saw that there were police cars in the open space, and when I asked my mom what happened, she said that they had found an older woman who was reported missing a few days before. She must have had a heart attack or stroke or something on the trail by the house that they have found the body. Number 6. I lived in a weird house as a kid, which resulted in chairs being moved in the other rooms when I was the only one home, kitchen cupboards being open late at night when no one else was awake. I could be sitting at the computer in a lit room at night and watch as a black cloud would float through a closed door and sit suspended in the air across the room from me. I had footsteps that would walk outside my door in loud breathing. I was so terrified as a child that I would ended up sleeping my music playing. sleeping while my music was playing so I could tune out the noises. I still, to this day, cannot sleep without music playing. I probably could have convinced myself that most of it wasn't real as I aged, if it wasn't for a certain weird happening. It was about 11 a.m. in the morning, and my younger brother and I were waiting at home while my mother was out doing jobs. We were waiting for her to come back to pick us up, so we were sitting by the front window watching for cars. And then we heard the radio playing from my brother's room. We both didn't understand why it was on all of a sudden, so we walked to my brother's room. My brother hid behind me, and I had to walk in the room first. And the second I crossed the threshold, the radio went silent. On closer inspection, it wasn't plugged in, and there were no batteries in the back of it. There was no logical explanation for it playing, and my brother, a young boy, had a bunch of Matchbox cars in an old car playmat. Swore and declared he had parked the cars neatly on it in lines, but we went in there and the cars were thrown all over the room. Number 7. My father passed away, and I always felt his presence around through the years. I had experienced simple things like cupboards opening, faucets running, a knock on the door every time I showered, but once, when my son was about 3, he told me his grandfather, my father, was standing in the dining room smiling at us. I nearly shat myself because I never spoke to him about my father. That night I had a dream that my dad came into my room and said I was doing great, sat on a chair and proceeded to float away on said chair. Ever since that night, I have felt him around me. Number 8. Before my girlfriend and I moved in together, my girlfriend lived alone in a house she owned. During the course of us dating and me spending the night, she finally explained some weird stuff going on in her home. Weird banging sounds happening at all hours. Other weird sounds, seeing things from the corner of your eye. There was even a couple times where she saw something walking around the house. She described it as being a robbed figure with almost like the Grim Reaper. There was also the feeling that something was watching you from behind. You know, that feeling that causes the hairs on the back of your neck to stand on end. But the worst was this constant foreboding feeling coming from one of my unused bedrooms. These happenings scared her so much, simply explaining it caused her to start to cry. Now, I'm a skeptic about these things, and I am that guy that would watch all those paranormal shows and find the logical reasoning for things happening. Since we are just dating at the time and I really liked her, I wanted to impress her, and I wanted to show her my bravado and my lack of fear for the thing in the room. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out of this house, you fucking asshole, I yelled into the room. Do not bother her again, you hear me? Or you'll have to deal with me, and you don't want to fuck with me. Big mistake. Really big mistake. I spent that night at my girlfriend's. Sometime in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up to night terror. I had them a couple of times before. I didn't experience anything crazy. Well, maybe once before this instant, but this instant felt international. It felt like I had poked a bear and wanted to show me that it didn't want to be fucked with. I woke up being paralyzed, heart throbbing, being able to see and hear what was around you. I could feel my girlfriend lying down next to me, and I could hear her breathing. This wasn't the scary part, though. The scariest part was hearing something run out of the room, down the stairs, away from me, and towards the unused bedroom. I could hear it make its way through the house. It is a small house, but whatever. I desperately tried to get out of this night terror. I tried telling myself it was a dream. I tried praying, and I desperately tried to call out my girlfriend's name. I knew it was a night terror, but ever since still, I couldn't get out of it. Every time before I could get out of a night terror by reminding myself what it was, she somehow heard my whispered calls and woke me up. I did not go back to sleep that night. Number 9. My grandmother died of brain cancer at about 20 years ago. About 2 weeks after she died, I was hanging out over at my parents' place, and my mom got a call. No number, no unknown number, just blank caller ID. She answered it, got quiet, hung up, and went to her room without saying anything. When I finally got her to talk about it, she said it was her mother, saying she was trapped and please come get her because they wouldn't let her leave, over and over again, and then the phone disconnected. I asked her about it a few years ago, and she denied that it happened for a bit and then admitted that it happened 2 more times that year and then stopped, but she didn't want to discuss it anymore. Number 10. We moved around a lot as a kid, and we were poor, so my parents typically would rent houses that were relatively cheap. I was probably 9 or 10 years old when we moved into the beautiful old home from the early 1900s in a not amazingly safe neighborhood, but it was far from the worst. One of the first nights after we moved there, this happened. I remember waking up feeling ice cold. It was really strange because it was in the middle of the summer. We didn't have air conditioning, and I wasn't allowed to have my window open at night. A soft blue light was coming from my closet, so I turned to look. There, sitting on the box in my open closet, was a woman, maybe in her mid-20s and early 30s, just crying. I could barely hear her, but what amazed me most is that she was blue, just like the light. I remember sitting up, staring at her, and asking what was wrong. She stopped, looked at me shocked, and after making eye contact for a few seconds, she faded away. I guess she didn't expect me to wake up or even to talk to her. In any case, it wasn't the last time I would see her, but I never felt afraid of her. We moved out when I was 12. We didn't live there very long. My mom didn't tell me why the rent was so cheap till we moved. Apparently, a woman and her mother were murdered there. For some burglar got wrong. Go figure. Number 11. This isn't my story, so it takes away from the horror factor a bit, but it was from a good friend that I know doesn't make fucking shit up. This story happens when he was about 8. He was playing hide and seek with his friends at this house. It was late, probably around 10ish. It was my friend's turn to find his friend. He was looking everywhere around the house, but he couldn't seem to find him anywhere. He eventually decided he must be hiding outdoors, so he leaves the house to find him. He starts searching around for some bushes when he hears his friend's voice calling from a dark corner maybe 20 feet away. His voice calls for him to come over. He didn't because he was already spooked out enough being outside in the pitch black. My friend yelled back, "No, you come over here." That's when he said it really started to get spooky. He told me the voice that sounded just like his friend kept insisting that he come over to the dark corner. My friend kept saying, "No, come over," and over again. At this point, he said the voice suddenly changed to a dark, horrible sounding voice demanding he come over. At this point, he ran back inside, only to see his friend in the living room. When questioned how he got inside so fast, the friend said he never went outside. Number 12. When I was 8, my family moved from urban South Florida to a very small town in North Florida. It was like from a Goosebumps book. A lot of weird stuff has happened in the 15 years since we moved in there, but the weirdest has got to be when my sister moved back with my parents. My sister's husband has been shipped off to Afghanistan, so she was left alone with a newborn son. Not wanting to go through the soul-crushing loneliness of raising a newborn all alone in a trailer in the woods, she moved back into the parents' home for a while. She said it started first when the headboard of her bed would slam every now and then. One day, she woke up because somebody was tickling her. She didn't really think about it until one night. She woke my mom up by screaming. My sister is almost 30. She's not a little kid, and my mom went into the whole fucking bed was rocking and shaking like really violently up and down to the sides like a boat going through white water. But my mom and sister have been through a lot of shit, so they persevered. One night my sister was nursing her son and something grabbed her ponytail and started yanking her head around the room. My mom went in the room and very sternly, like talking to a bad kid, said, "I understand things are different. There's a little baby boy here and there has never been before. You're curious, I understand that, but you will not touch them anymore. You can look, you can stay. You were here before us, but I swear to God you are not allowed to touch them." It fucking stopped happening. Thank you for listening to my video. If you have any creepy experiences like this, be sure to comment below. If you want to have more videos like this, be sure to like this video, and I would be happy to create more. See ya.